Tanks meet within sight lines measured in hundreds of yards, not miles. Doctrine teaches you to get inside the enemy's ability to observe first, to trade accuracy for survivability. You train to fight at 300, 500, maybe 1,000 yards if the terrain allows. Anything beyond that? That's artillery's job. That's the gunner's domain. Direct fire tank duels happen where shell drop, windage, and lead are manageable. Where a human eye can judge, a human hand can aim. That rule exists for reasons carved out of hard experience. In Normandy and the hedgerows, you learn how quickly a Panther's gun finds you. You learn which rounds will punch through a glacis at 500 yards and which will bounce off at 1,000. You trust the math and the manuals, the ballistics tables, the armor charts, the doctrine written by men who survived, who were willing to recommend caution when lives are on the line. The German Panthers teach you one more rule etched in steel. You do not expose yourself across open ground when enemy heavy guns are present. German crews use slope, camber, and hull-down positions. They wait until you are visible, until you have to move, and then they make the first count. They observe, they aim, they fire. The pattern is cruelly consistent. American tank destroyer units learn it the hard way. Knocked out vehicles, burned hulls, lists of the dead. In November 1944 the 814th had already paid the price. 11 tank destroyers lost, 17 men dead, proof that doctrine and reality do not always align. But a single moment in December will force you to ask the rule a different question. What if the gun and the sight can do more than the doctrine says? What if distance is not an absolute barrier but a variable you can push? In 1 hour, on December 1, 1944, one lieutenant will test that limit, and his action will shatter a comfortable assumption not by doctrine but by demonstration. You meet Alfred Rose at the turret lip, not in a photograph but in the cramped reality of an M36 Jackson. He is 26 years old on December 1, 1944. 3 weeks ago he reported to the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion. He has 0 confirmed kills. He has hours, not months, behind the 90mm breech. His manual knowledge is bookish, his hands are learning the geometry of controls by feel, and the battlefield is the cruelest teacher. His vehicle is the M36 Jackson, a Sherman hull rearmed with the most powerful American tank gun in the European theater, the 90mm M3. On paper, the M36 is the answer to late-war German armor. Muzzle velocity around 2,700 feet per second, an M82 AP round weighing roughly 24 pounds, theoretical penetration figures suggesting the capacity to threaten Panther frontal and side armor at much greater distances than older American tank guns. The Jackson's M76F telescopic sight even bears a reticle that stretches to 4,600 yards, a number that hangs on the sight glass like a dare. The engineers etched theory into glass. Doctrine wrote it down. Men like Rose must still prove it in practice. The tactical environment is northwestern Europe in late 1944, the Ruhr sector north of the German frontier, a patchwork of open fields, seasonal hedgerows, narrow highways and villages. The Allies pressed the Siegfried Line. German units probe and counterattack to slow the drive. The German 5th Panzer Army fields Panthers in numbers, at least 40 in the area by intelligence reports, and they use them as mobile bastions. Panthers are lethal at the ranges the Americans normally close to. Their sloped frontal armor repels many Allied rounds. The M10S and M18S of earlier months are inadequate. American doctrine insists on maneuver to shorten ranges and bring guns inside the Panther's killing zone. Still, terrain is not always obedient. In the high ground northeast of Beek, a small crest that gives clear sight lines across a broad sweep of highway and fields, a rare condition appears. A long, unobstructed avenue of fire and an enemy vehicle that fails to adopt cover. For the men at the crest, that condition is a dangerous temptation and an opportunity that defies the rule. Rose has 3 weeks with the battalion and less than an hour behind the M76 FS markings. He has fired 4 training rounds through the Jackson's 90mm in practice. Enough to know the gun's recoil, not enough to know its reach. He does not know the idiosyncrasies of his sight, whether the reticle adjustments exactly correspond to published tables, whether field modifications have altered zeroing, whether crosswinds and elevation in this sector will require a consistent offset. He has no calculator in the turret. He has experience mostly with the doctrine that says close and engage. His crew is standard, commander perched above and behind his left shoulder, loader to his left ready with M82 AP rounds, driver down in the hull, assistant driver ready for orders. Around them, the battalion is thinly spread, a defensive pattern born of recent casualties, a habit of dispersion to survive enemy observation and counter-battery. They are dog-weary from November losses. Their officers have told them, hold high ground, report movement and wait for targets. The men know the cost of exposure. At 10:42 a.m. on December 1st, Rose climbs into the turret of his M36 positioned on that high ground. The sky is pale, visibility clear. He presses his face to the rubber eyepiece of the M76F and sweeps the horizon. Range markings sit etched on the glass in 100-yard increments. The maximum, reads 4,600 yards. The distance little more than a number to men who fight at a few hundred yards. But the sight is not a talisman. It's a tool that, if used, will make numbers meaningful. At 11:15 a.m., movement appears at the extreme edge of the sight. Dark, angular, moving slowly left to right some 2.5 miles away along a distant highway. A Panther. It is the sort of target you hope never to face at distance. Its crew is traveling at about 6 to 8 miles per hour, linear and unbothered. A creature of habit and perhaps overconfidence. The Panther's long barrel and sloped glassy red is a silhouette that the M76F can resolve. Barely, but resolve it does. Rose's first reaction is what doctrine has taught. Report and let someone else deal with it. Engage at this distance? That's artillery, a hunter's fantasy. The ballistics tables often stop well short of these yards. At these ranges the projectile drop, wind deflection and time of flight multiply into near impossibility. The M82 round loses velocity, energy falls, manuals stop promising outcomes. But a second reality sits there. The telescope's range markings are not decoration. They encode a ballistic truth the ordnance people expected engineers and gunners to test. The M390mm round, launched at high muzzle velocity, maintains enough kinetic energy to threaten thin side armor even at extreme ranges, provided you can place the shot. And the Panther is moving predictably. Rose decides to test the practical edge of that rule. Doctrine says close. Physics says the M36 might reach. Experience gives him few answers. He has hours, not months, to convert glass and theory into a confirmed result. He steadies himself at the eyepiece. He calls the sighting up the chain. The commander climbs up and looks himself, silent for 5 seconds. The loader clicks an M82 into the breech without waiting for a hero's call. The battalion's after-action report will later note the exchange in blunt terms. Range approximate 4,600 yards. Target moving laterally. Lieutenant Rose engaged. And in that silence before the first shot, you feel the split between doctrine and possibility. An officer with 3 weeks on the job, a sight that reads to 4,600 yards, a Panther moving in the open, and a decision to find out what the gun and the man could truly do. It is 11:15 a.m., December 1st, 1944, when Alfred Rose sees it, a sliver of shadow moving along the farthest edge of the M76F telescopic sight. He blinks once, twice, then leans forward. There. A dark, angular silhouette sliding left to right across the horizon. At this distance, it shouldn't be anything. Maybe a truck. Maybe a tractor. Maybe his imagination. But as the seconds pass, the outline resolves. The long barrel. The slap sides. The low, predatory stance. A German Panther. Moving at a slow, steady crawl, 6 to 8 miles per hour, along a distant road nearly 2.6 miles away. 2.6 miles. You do not fight tanks at that range. You do not see tanks at that range. Artillery fights at that range. A destroyer's naval guns fire at that range. But not tanks. Never tanks. And yet here it is, framed perfectly in his M76F sight, just a dark insect on an endless, pale highway. His first instinct is survival. Report the sighting. Let someone else deal with it. Because what he's looking at is not a target. It's a problem. A Panther's frontal armor can shrug off American shells at 800 yards. This one is more than 4,600 yards away. The ballistic drop alone is absurd. Wind drift? Unknown. Flight time? Maybe 6, maybe 7 seconds. In 7 seconds, that Panther will move dozens of yards. If he fires it where it is, the round will land where it used to be. And yet, the Panther is unaware. Unprotected. Just rolling across the countryside, oblivious to a gunner on high ground who barely knows his equipment. Rose swallows hard. He has fired 4 training rounds in his life. He does not know this weapon. He does not trust this sight. But the engineers who built this M76F optic cut range marks all the way out to 4,600 yards. Why? Because they believed, at least on paper, the gun could reach that far. But could it hit anything? Rose doesn't know. He is about to find out. He calls out. Panther, extreme range. Moving lateral. His commander climbs beside him, peers through his own sight, and goes quiet for 5 long seconds. Then, Rose's call. Rose's shot. That's the permission, the burden, the responsibility. The loader already has an M82 armor-piercing round chambered, a 24-pound projectile designed to shatter steel. The Panther keeps rolling. Rose sets the elevation for 4,000 yards, intentionally short. He needs data. He needs to see where the round lands. He leads the tank by roughly 50 yards, exhaling slowly as the Panther glides across the distant highway. Then, boom. The 90mm gun kicks back hard, rocking the turret. Dust rises. Smoke obscures everything. Rose presses his face to the sight. Nothing. 5 seconds. 6. Still nothing. The round fell short, he knows it instinctively. He adjusts elevation. Adds another 100 yards. The Panther continues, perfectly unaware. Second shot. Boom. Recoil. Smoke. Sight picture clears. 6 seconds. 7. Then he sees it. A faint dust puff, maybe 20 yards short of the Panther. He has data now. Not enough, but enough to gamble. He adjusts again. Raises elevation. Leads the Panther by an extra 10 yards. Ranges the reticle to exactly 4,600 yards, the last marking on the sight. This is it. The shot. Rose inhales. Exhales. Waits. The Panther moves into the predicted intercept point. His finger tightens. Boom. The round leaves the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. By the time it reaches the highway, velocity has dropped massively. But physics still favors him. At 4,600 yards, the Panther's side armor, only 40 to 50 millimeters, is vulnerable. 7 seconds pass. And then, through the optic, a bright flash. A spark along the Panther's hull. Then a violent bloom from inside the tank. He hit it. Dead center. Behind the forward road wheel, exactly where ammunition is stored. A secondary explosion erupts as the Panther's 79 rounds cook off inside. The tank lurches to a stop, smoke pouring from its hatches. The crew is gone before they ever knew they were under fire. The impossible has happened. But Rose doesn't stop shooting. The confirmation. Doctrine demands certainty. He fires again. It switches to high explosive. Another hit. Flames engulf the turret. Rounds 6 and 7 rip into the hull as black smoke pours skyward. Within seconds, the Panther becomes a furnace. Absolute, undeniable, catastrophic kill. The engagement lasts 2 minutes. 7 rounds fired. One shot that will enter history. The range, 4,600 yards. The second longest tank kill in military history for nearly 5 decades. Rose pulls away from the sight. His hands shake. His breath is unsteady. Not from fear. From the knowledge that he just expanded the limits of armored warfare by a factor no one believed possible. And before the smoke column stops rising over the Rhineland highway, the ripple of what he did has already begun. What Rose doesn't realize as he steps back from the M36F sight, hands trembling from the recoil and adrenaline, is that his impossible shot has already begun reshaping the way American officers think about the tank destroyer force. At the tactical level, men in the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion talk first. Word spreads through crews, then companies, then the battalion HQ. A Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards. Messages like that ripple across units at the speed of disbelief. But the real shock comes when the formal after-action reports are filed. The battalion operations officer reads the figures, recalculates the geometry, checks map grids, and sends it up the chain. Each level assumes there must be an error, a misplaced digit, a mistaken range estimate, a misread site mark. Yet each eyewitness report repeats the same thing: range. 4,600 yards. Confirmed kill. Witnessed. Verified. Up the chain to the 7th Armored Division. Then to 19 Corps. Then to 1st Army. By the time it reaches Ordnance officers and staff analysts, the questions are no longer about Rose's competence. They become something far more important. Have we underestimated the 90mm gun? Have we underestimated the M36F sight? Have we underestimated our own equipment? Doctrine had been built around short-range fighting because M10S and M18S required it. But the battlefield is changing. Terrain in Germany provides open ground where long fire lanes exist. And the Germans, short on fuel, short on training time, and increasingly desperate, are using their Panthers in predictable ways. Rose's shot triggers the question no staff college had dared write down. If a single lieutenant can do this under combat conditions, what could trained, experienced gunners accomplish with deliberate doctrine? What they didn't know, what no one yet understood, was that Rose's engagement foreshadowed a future of armored warfare defined not by instinct but by computation. The true impact of the 4,600-yard kill wouldn't be understood until years after the war, when military analysts re-examined combat ranges using modern gunnery science. They discovered something startling. Rose's ranging procedure matched almost exactly what Cold War tank doctrine would later require. His lead calculation was within the margin of error of modern ballistic computers. His ability to walk rounds without being detected showed the future value of long-range harassment fire. And the biggest revelation came from the Germans themselves. Captured German reports from December 1944 describe a disturbing shift in American behavior. Enemy tank destroyers opened fire at ranges previously believed impossible. They didn't know Rose's name. They didn't know the details. But they sensed the rule had changed. And with that shift came a second shock, logistical, not tactical. German armor commanders understood their tanks were superior at close range. But at extended range? At distances where American optics and velocity mattered? The Panther's sloped armor advantage shrank. Its vulnerabilities widened. A Panther hit at long distance was still a Panther destroyed. American abundance, in fuel, ammunition, spare barrels for 90mm guns, meant they could afford experimentation. The Germans couldn't. They were running out of everything but desperation. Rose's kill became proof of a larger truth emerging across the Western Front. Technology and logistics were overtaking German tactics. Range, not armor, was becoming the currency of survival. And the U.S. was rich beyond measure. Even as Rose moved on to St. Vith, the Ardennes, and the brutal close-quarters fighting that defined December 1944, the ripple from his December 1st shot continued expanding, upward, outward, and into the doctrine of a world preparing for a new age of armored warfare. When the war ends, the world moves on. Battalions disband. Jacksons are scrapped. New tanks arrive. New wars begin. And men like Alfred Rose return home to places where no one speaks in yards and muzzle velocities and sloped armor values. But legacy does not depend on memory. Legacy depends on record. And the record is clear. Lieutenant Alfred Rose, age 26, 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion, destroyed a German Panther from 4,600 yards. A distance no American gunner had ever achieved. A distance no American gunner would exceed for nearly half a century. Rose goes back to civilian life. He declines the Army's offer to make him an instructor. He leaves the war behind because he's seen enough. His hands that steadied a 90mm gun at 4,600 yards now steady the quiet routines of peace. He never gives an interview. He never writes a memoir. In the archives, he is a set of coordinates, a timestamp, an incredible range figure, the signatures of witnesses who saw what he did. Most of his crew fades from records, their names scattered through morning reports and personnel rosters. Men aged 19 to 32 from Indiana, New Jersey, Oregon, Texas, farms and mills and cities. Their lives after the war rarely intersect the history they helped create. But the impact remains. To this day, even now, tank gunnery instructors still cite the shot. Not because they expect anyone to repeat it, but because it proves something profound. Human skill can exceed doctrine. Courage can exceed training. Possibility can exceed expectation. The M36 Jackson, long retired, lives on in museums and static displays, but every time someone asks, what was its real range? The answer traces back to one morning in December 1944. The legacy of Rose's shot is not that it was long. It's that it was impossibly long, until it wasn't. Because one man, with 3 weeks of training for practice rounds, and the nerve to test a theory etched into a sight glass, decided to challenge the rule. And in doing so, he changed the story armored warfare tells about itself. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells YouTube that this piece of forgotten history is worth remembering. We are dedicated to rescuing stories like this from dusty archives, stories of courage, precision, sacrifice, and the men who made the impossible possible. If you want to join us on this mission, subscribe and turn on notifications. And now, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? Which city, which state, which country? And did someone in your family serve? Your voice keeps these memories alive. Thank you for ensuring that Lieutenant Alfred Rose and the men of the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.